All righty. Good evening, everybody. Okay. So we are in lesson 21, and we handed this out a week or two ago. I'm not exactly sure, but I do have a few copies. So come and get them if you need one. Okay. 3. Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. Okay. There you go. Okie dokie. So we're picking up in our notes, I believe it's Roman numeral 3, that's faith sees the invisible. I think that's the way it should be. Same thing in your notes. Does that sound right? So the passage we're working with is in Hebrews chapter 11, and we've talked about faith, definition of faith, examples of faith, and the first one we started with was the title Faith in the Primeval Age, which is a weird word, but just the beginning of, human existence and all that, and the individuals that were present, that faith was on the scene from the get-go. And we see that with Abel, and then Enoch, and moving forward to Noah. And now we're discussing things in and around the life of Abraham and Jacob and Isaac. So this is kind of taking a turn now into an area that's titled the patriarchal age, so faith of the patriarchs. So verse 10, so we'll back up to verse 8. By faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance, and he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. For he was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. So we're picking up here is that faith sees the invisible. Now, what we find here is in this is he was looking for a city. Now, it was because he looked for far beyond earthly things, he was able to see this. So he had his eye on a greater prize than a physical land. Now, surely, when he first got the promise, there in Genesis chapter 11, 12, around there, when he got that first promise, surely he had to be thinking about physical land. That had to be what was on his mind from the get-go. But he, I think as things, days and weeks and months and years went by, started to realize that maybe there's something bigger at play here. And I think we have indications that he understood that. Now, the word here, and it tells us that this idea that he looked, that's in the imperfect tense in the Greek, and it indicates that Abraham's eye was ever looking far beyond Canaan. His eye was fixed on the heavenly city where the saints of God spend all of eternity. Now, in this faith, it made little difference to him when the promise regarding the earthly Canaan was fulfilled. So it could have been fulfilled in his lifetime, could it? Certainly, but it was not. It was quite a bit of time after. So what took place before the fulfillment? Well, the fulfillment here of the land promise taking place. So, I mean, there still was a lot that took place, but what took place? So between like the end of Abraham's life and some other things had to occur, what all went on, but when did that happen? Yeah, so basically the time where they went into slavery were there for a long time, 400 years? Yeah, a long period of time that they were there, and then they left out in the Exodus, and then it was another 40 years, could have been a couple weeks, but they were a bit kind of knuckleheads. And so there was a tremendous amount of stuff that occurred. Abraham did not see that day with his own eyes. However, that didn't mean that he didn't still trust that it was going to happen. It may or may not happen in his lifetime, and it certainly didn't. So, in this faith, it made little difference to him when the promise regarding the earthly Canaan was fulfilled. He expected an eternal inheritance, just as we do. Now, Abraham understood that the earthly land of promise was only a type and symbol of the heavenly Canaan. And so, here we have that idea of type or antitype. Those are words we don't use a whole lot other than the biblical context. So think of a foreshadow and fulfillment when you hear those words. So the foreshadow is the type, right? And the fulfillment is the antitype. So when you hear those words type and antitype, kind of would throw you off a little bit. But type and antitype is what we're looking at. So the symbol, Abraham understood that the earthly land of promise was only a type and a symbol of the heavenly Canaan, and antitype always gives added value to a type. So the foreshadows always, it could be a good thing or valuable or important or whatever, but the fulfillment is always greater than. And that's really the whole point of Hebrews and the person of Jesus when we talk about all the things that were typologically spoken of Jesus and people and places and things that all pointed to him. Those were all great in and of themselves. Think about this. Think of a type that was pretty great in the moment, but was even greater in Jesus Christ. For example, right? So we're talking about the Exodus. Well, there was a point in time when they grumbled and were upset and did some stuff, and God said, all right, you want to complain? How about some snakes? Here you go. In fact, when they bite you, you're going to die. And so the camp was overrun with that, right? So what then were they instructed to do? They took a standard, a pole, and fashioned a bronze serpent on top of that, right? Yeah, so that was a good thing in that moment, because what did that bronze serpent mean to them? Put it in a word. In that moment, when you get bit by a snake, you look to that. What's cure? Salvation. Yeah, if we put it in a word, it means salvation, right? So that's pretty great. Right? I mean, if you get bit by a snake, you want to cure pretty quick. Salvation from that. So, but the greater than, in John chapter 3, we know some verses there, right? It's talking about that whole thing, but in there's this one verse that shows up, and it says, just as the bronze serpent was raised up in the wilderness, so will the Son of Man be raised up, right? Far greater than salvation from snakes. It's salvation for sins, for all mankind is what's taking place in there. So the type is always, the antitype is always greater than the type itself, than the foreshadow. Now, to say it differently, when the Old Testament type is fulfilled, it is always grander than the type in multiple ways. Now here, the land becomes a city, the New Jerusalem. Prominent here is the idea of permanence. So, was the land of Canaan permanent? Nope. I mean, they were in and out of that place all the time because of their sin, their disobedience, their all that stuff. It was a cycle that they, so it's an everlasting kind of a thing. It's kind of a thing. It's as long as you remain in the covenant, and they did not. They broke the covenant. In fact, can you think of a greater way of breaking the covenant with God than killing his son? And they were held accountable for that. Jesus stood above Jerusalem and said, how I'd love to gather them as chicks, right? Because he knew what was coming. He knew what was coming. So, it's a permanent city. So this idea, this where it says, which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. That's a pretty cool concept. Now, the permanence of the unseen city is underscored in two ways. First, the city has foundations. Do tents have foundations? No. Now, remember, that was one of the things we talked about, that he probably left behind was a home with a foundation to go live in tents. And so now he's looking for a home that has foundations that are not man-made, so that tents did not have. So now this city was both designed and erected by God himself. Builder means craftsman, artificer, designer, maker. Maker refers to the one who executes the plan of the designer. So John's vision of